Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm talking about, well, I've called it your Christmas stars because it's going to cover that period right the way from sort of the 4th of December right through to New Year's Eve. But of course, it's a lot more than that, as it always is, because it's Christmas and there's a Christmas story to tell. But before I get into all of that, I just wanted to tell you about, or remind you, depends how familiar you are with my work and how often you go to my website, astrolutely.com. But I have a book that is a great book to give at Christmas if you've got people who love cooking, love recipes, and also love astrology. It's called The Zodiac Cooks, and it is my passion. I'm not just an astrologer, but I'm a passionate cook. And in this book, which I wrote a few years ago, was based on the idea of the correlation between plants, animals, the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets, the signs, and everything really in life. And what I've done is to make sure that the recipes are all according to your sign and a planet that rules your sign. So we've got some astrological science in there, but it's much more than that. When I take you through the kitchen of life, I'm really talking about each of the signs of the zodiac. And then I look at kitchen styles, how things might look, and also food issues. What are the food issues that go with the different signs? As well, of course, there's all those lovely recipes and things that we like to eat, especially as we like to eat things at Christmas. But I'm not here just to talk about Christmas, good food, and astrology. I'm here to talk about Christmas itself. Now, back in the day, many decades ago, really, I wrote an article for the Guardian newspaper about the Christmas star. What was the Christmas star? What was the star in the East? And I'm not the first person, of course, to look into this, but it did start me on a bit of a quest myself to really look at, why we celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December. And the idea is a beautiful kind of history, if you like, of the three wise men from the east traveling towards this star which took them to Bethlehem. It's very romantic, and it is almost certainly based on fact, but not the fact that everybody thinks about. If we go back to those pre-kind of Christian days, if we go back to the ancient Babylonians, the Sumerians, the real forefathers of astrology who studied the heavens and studied the movements of the planets and were very, very precise with their calculations of where the planets were, where they would continue to be, the eclipses. We owe everything really to those early forebears of ours as astrologers. And of course, the astrologers of the day were the wise men of the day. They were the intelligent intellectuals of the time, studying the stars and not just the movements, but also what their implication was. What does it mean? And so these ancient astronomer priests would have seen that in the year, wherever they were looking at it that year, because of course they didn't know it was Anno Domini or before Christ, but they noted that there would be a very powerful triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And what we mean by a triple conjunction is that within a space of a year, you're going to have Jupiter and Saturn meeting in conjunction, and that doesn't often happen. In fact, it's every 953 years, so almost a millennia it takes to have that happen again. In fact, we had one recently. 1940 was the last time we had a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. But of course, what those ancient astronomer priests would have notice that not only was this a very, very rare event according to their calculations, but it was occurring in the sign of Pisces. And in ancient times, the Babylonian astronomers associated Pisces with the Jews. So we get this idea of the astronomer priests doing their calculations, and that way coming with the conclusion that a great king was to be born at that particular time on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So it's a lovely story. It has its base in fact, but we are in fact looking at 7 BC, not a kind of 0 before, we went forward from the birth of Christ. Around 7 BC we're looking. That's when this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Pisces would have occurred. Now, we did recently have a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the sign of Capricorn, and this is a picture of that particular conjunction. And so you can sort of see how bright it is. And, it remained bright. I remember running around the countryside with my camera, trying to shoot it above the lake where I was in Sweden, because it was sort of magical. It had a halo around it. And I just had a very, very ordinary camera. I didn't have anything special as the one you're looking at now. But it was a rather magical thing to be able to see it. So you can imagine thousands of years ago, the awe-inspiring nature of this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Pisces. So just also to bring you up to speed with the idea of the 25th of December, which became the day we celebrate the birth of Christ. Like so many of the Christian festivals, they did replace or go in the place of previous festivals, sometimes pagan, sometimes, going back to the ancient world. And in fact, this particular date, 25th of December, was very important in the Roman calendar, and it was very important, well, really in the Roman calendar, because the Persian myth or the Persian cult of Mithras was celebrated. They celebrated the birth of Mithras on the 25th of December. And that then became, from the Roman calendar, a suitable way of supplanting the idea of the birth of our Saviour on that particular day. It's also the Saturnalia. I know a lot of you will be screaming at me and saying, that was also the festival of Saturnalia. And yes, it was. It was the sort of end of that particular time of revelry. So we have everything in here. We have the idea of the birth of a great spiritual being. And we also have the idea of celebration and revelry that came together in all of this package. When I did my research back in the day, I located this date of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. It happened 3 times during the year, once in May, if I'm right, the other in September, and then the last one, ironically, in December. But I chose this period of September as probably the place where it would have been for all sorts of kind of practical reasons, as well as getting the astrology right. And here is the chart that I came up with. And this is says on it the 6th of September, but of course that's a recalculation really for the time of, the times that they were in. And of course, what you can see here very clearly is in the 5 o'clock position, we've got Saturn and Jupiter together in the sign of Pisces. And we also have the moon. Now, ancient astronomers would not have known about Uranus because that was only discovered in 1781. So it would not be known that Uranus was near the moon or Pluto was near the sun or the fact that Neptune was rising. But this is a beautiful chart to consider for the birth of a great king, a great spiritual leader. Whatever your religion, I'm not trying to force religion down your throat. I'm just looking at this idea of the birth of a great king, of the son of our Lord, so to speak. And we know that he made a great sacrifice. He sacrificed his life. And here at this particular time, on this particular day, we see Neptune rising to the ascendant. And we also have, obviously, the moon in Pisces, Jupiter and Saturn conjunction in Pisces, the sun at the opposite point. This is a full moon birth, and it's conjunct Pluto. We get this idea of death and rebirth. And of course, this was a very, very powerful theme throughout Christ's life and what we associate with Jesus Christ. So I just thought I'd put that up for interest so that we can celebrate the season, so to speak, this very special time, and also see, the context of what's going on at this time. And, when Christmas is lovely. I mean, we remember when we were children how excited we would be for Christmas, and it's still the same, even when we're grown up, even when we're rather elderly. Christmas is still a wonderful time of year. And when we go out into our high streets and we see the lights and the Christmas trees and the decorations in the shops, then it makes us feel good. And it makes us love the magic of Christmas, which of course is a very kind of Neptunian thing. And as we'll see as we go through what we're looking at this point in time, it is indeed very Neptunian. And just before I leave this whole subject, in case you're interested and you know what a researcher I am, I love to have all the bits and pieces of the background. The reason that we in the Christian church celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December was given to us by Pope Julius I back in the 4th century, because there was so much argument about when do we actually celebrate this extraordinary moment. And he came along and said, okay, I think this is the best date. This is when we do it. So that's why we have 25th of December for the birthday of Jesus Christ. So here we are, we've got our Christmas stars, and I'm sort of beginning just before we come to the new moon. The new moon is on the 12th of December, and it's in the sign of Sagittarius. And I'm going to release this video just before the full moon on the 4th of December. So as we begin this particular time that I'm going to be addressing, we are in a very Neptunian phase. So it's very magical, it's enchanting, it's kind of uplifting, it's spiritual, it's all these good things we get from Neptune, but also very chaotic. So there are a lot of things that are confusing, whether I mean out there in the world with lots of mixed messages and not getting correct information from our news sources or whatever it is, and also in our own lives, perhaps being a little bit confused about certain things and not really feeling as though we've got a grip on one or two things. And that full moon I discussed in my previous video. So if you haven't yet had a chance to look at that video, go and look at it now, because it gives you a much bigger picture of all the sorts of things that were happening at that particular time. So the idea of a new moon is always a new beginning, and we get 12 of them every year, sometimes 13, as we do this year. We have 13 full moon, new moons, because we had a blue moon not so very long ago. So Sagittarius is a sign that we associate with the big beyond. And when we think about wide horizons, far horizons that Sagittarius governs, if you like, we think about two things. We think about people and places far away. So this new moon can inspire new chapters to do with people and places overseas. It can inspire a journey of some description, possibly a very, very long journey. And again, we can use that to say, well, this new moon inspires a journey in miles, or it inspires a journey in experience and knowledge, journey one way or another. A Sagittarius is a very spiritual sign, or it's a sign that seeks to find a kind of a cosmology more than necessarily religion per se. It likes to have some kind of structure to its questing for meaning. It's one of, when we look at the houses of the horoscope, the 9th house is a seeking house. We seek something in there. So a new moon is about seeking something in the sign of Sagittarius. But the idea of the beyond, looking beyond, far horizons, wide horizons, not just in terms of miles and people far, far away, but also for us, our projects and the things that we wish to have happen years down the line, if necessary. So we're looking at a 5-year plan, we're looking at a 10-year plan, or whatever you have, so that at this time, with a new moon and a new beginning and a new chapter, is a great time to think about, where do I want to be in about 10 years' time or 5 years' time, long period of time. And sometimes that really does have a very relevant meaning, in the sense that, where do you want to be? Do you want to be living where you are right now, or do you want to be in another state or another country? And so this new moon gives you the opportunity to really make those beginnings and get on a trajectory with your kind of aims much, much further down the line. So we're going to look at this particular new moon in the context of all the other things astrologically that are going on at the time. And then once I've taken you through this, then we'll look at the days after that and the configurations that are forming. We'll go on to look at the full moon. But let's get this one in place first of all. And here is our new moon in Sagittarius. So I've set this particular new moon for London, and the reason it's London is that I always start at London, and then I decide that isn't a good picture. Let's go and see east or west where we can get a better one. But this is in fact quite a good picture, because we can see the new moon at the base of the chart, the 6 o'clock position, the sun and moon at 20 degrees of Sagittarius, and we can see that it is quite close to Mars. It's not, bang up close, but it's still a conjunction. And in fact, we've had a lot of, the sun has been close to Mars for quite a long time, really since the beginning of December. They've sort of been vaguely together, which is why this has been, right up to this point of the new moon, quite a kind of antsy period where there's been a lot of aggravation on the one hand, but also a lot of sense that we want to get somewhere with life. We want to be somewhere. We want to get moving with things. We're being impatient. We don't want to wait for anything. We just want to get going. And it's also why arguments break out more frequently. Remember, Mars is not ambition and drive only, it's also aggravation. So we do get a fair amount of aggravation, and you don't need me to tell you what kind of aggravation we've been seeing on our television screens in recent weeks. But if we look also at this this particular new moon, we can see that at the time we've also got Venus in the sky, opposing Jupiter, and we see Venus here at the let's say the 3 o'clock in the morning. No, we're looking at a clock. It's the 8 o'clock time, of 8 o'clock, and we can see Jupiter at the opposite end. And in fact, that too has been very active, really, since the earlier days in December. And this is one of the reasons that in my columns, when I've been talking to each of you as a sign of the zodiac in my forecast, I've been very bullish about this first sort of full week of December because of that Venus-Jupiter opposition. It really is the epitome of goodwill. It's the epitome of joy. And if there's one thing that we've been short of for a very long time, it's joy. So this particular aspect is the reason why there have been little spots of very good news, and you yourself have experienced good things and a sense of, I know it's been difficult this year, but hey, guess what? Isn't this marvelous? The other thing that I want you to look at here is, if you see the new moon, 20 degrees of Sagittarius. If you go up towards the 3 o'clock position, you'll see the planet Neptune at 24 degrees of Pisces, which means that this new moon on the 12th of December is in fact squaring the planet Neptune, again bringing all that Neptunian qualities that I've talked about a little bit before, the idea of great spiritual, it's a strongly spiritual kind of connection, but it's also inspirational. It brings us that sense that we rise above our experiences and we seek meaning in things, but really from a kind of spiritual source. The downside to anything when we've got Neptune is that it can be very deceiving, and we get into situations that we think are one thing when in fact they're another. And so we have to bear in mind both the good aspects, if you like, of Neptune and also its kind of less positive phase. I also want you to look at the position of Pluto here in about the 5 o'clock position, 28 degrees of Capricorn, nearly 29. And if we can look at the nodal axis, that's like the Omega sign at the 2 o'clock position in our circle, and it's the opposite, the south node, we'll see that Pluto is still squaring the nodal axis, and the nodal axis is where eclipses form. And so this is why these last sort of 4 months have been so powerful, in the sense that we've seen events happen that have changed fortunes, and we've seen incredible events going on that have really unsettled us and have brought all sorts of things that are of a not very pleasant nature into our experience. And Pluto certainly dredges things that are buried deep in the earth right up to the surface. And of course, we've had our share of volcanoes and, you know, things like that. But it is the reason why there's a lot of stored up anger and a lot of stored up kind of sense of vengeance and paying for the past, if you like. And we've seen a lot of this in a lot of the big events that have happened out there on the world stage. And of course, it's happened in our own lives as well. So Mercury, where can we find Mercury? It's just down at the bottom here, near the new moon. That turns retrograde the day after the new moon of the 12th. So it will be stationary during that period. And whenever a planet is stationary, and Neptune was stationary on the 6th of December, we get all the properties of those planets kind of supercharged. We're super aware of them. So this period when Mercury is poised to go retrograde, we can expect our fair share of dilemmas, diversions, and dramas with anything to do with communication and travel. And I certainly know in England there are a lot of plans for train strikes, and of course we may have a lot of problems with the postal service and with all sorts of other factors that in fact, delay the smooth running of any kind of communication. But we need to also remember that while Mercury is retrograde, we have an opportunity to go back over things that we've done before. So if we've made a decision and we regret that decision, we can go back over it and remake it and consider, you know, how much better to do something. So it always has its upside. And also journeys in nostalgia, I think, are very retrograde Mercury as well. And considering we're coming up to Christmas at that point and Mercury will be retrograde over Christmas, then we can see that there will be many journeys into the past, many revisitations, if you like, of things that have happened in the past, sometimes in a very beautiful way, always with an idea of resolving them if there are problems. But sometimes, of course, history plays into the events that are happening at Christmas, and sometimes that's difficult for us to manage. So we need to remember that that's there as well. On the 17th of December, the Sun will be squaring Neptune. So again, all the things I've been mentioning about Neptune will be particularly strong. And with Mercury retrograde at that period if you are traveling, whether you're traveling by air, by train, by boat, by bus, by car. Remember that there can be unforeseen problems with journeys. So leave plenty of time for your journey. Don't rely on information that you're given. Check it out. Have backup plans. You'll probably almost certainly get where you're going, but maybe it will have been very much around the pretty route. On the 21st of December, Venus will be opposed to Uranus, which means, as so often happens in the pre-Christmas period, there's a lot of anxiety and tensions, especially on the home front with everything that's going on there. So it's worth remembering that if you are feeling tense and if there are relationship issues with someone, that at that period in time, if you don't take it gently and walk away from a situation, then sometimes there can be a very fiery ending to a relationship around that time. The other thing I want to say too about that, the Neptune pattern that we're living with at the moment, I think especially if you're born in March, around the middle of March, let's say, or the middle of June, the middle of September, and of course here we are in the middle of December, then Neptune is a very strong player in your particular astrological story. So while this planet may be giving you a lot of ideas about things that you want to have happen in your life, that you may be very inspired, and your dreams, you want to build your dreams. At the same time, it can mean that you've not got a full grip on reality, and maybe a lot of situations are slipping through your fingers, and that you feel that you can't get to grips with someone or something. And often that happens in a relationship, and you may be ghosted, you may not hear from someone, you may feel that someone's giving you mixed messages. And although that's a trend to remember in this, generally in this period of the year, I think if you do have a birthday in the periods that I have suggested, then it is a particularly kind of strong theme for you. On the 22nd of December, the sun comes into Capricorn. So that begins a whole new difference in your chart, depending on where the Capricorn falls. And of course, it also supplies a very different dynamic, because with Sagittarius, we have this fiery, enthusiastic, exuberant, optimistic, let's go for it kind of feel with Sagittarius. Well, you come to Capricorn, it's all about reality. It's all about getting things organized. It's all about tradition. It's about things being real, not being fantastic. So there's a swing around that time. And maybe you'll even notice that you don't, not feeling quite so kind of optimistic and gung-ho as you were before in the earlier part of December. Now you're beginning to see the reality of things. And because Mercury is retrograde, it may be that all sorts of things that you had planned for Christmas are now subject to changes. People can't get there. You can't get where you're supposed to be going. Deliveries don't happen. Amazon can't get your parcels to you on the right day. So there's all that kind of thing going on at this time. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to look at the next chart that we're going to be looking at to show how these things have progressed by the time we get to the full moon, because the full moon, of course, happens just after Christmas. All around the Christmas period, as I've said, Mercury is retrograde. But also, as you can see from this picture here, we've also got Mars drawing ever nearer to a square to Neptune. And I think you can see it more clearly in this chart because I've actually drawn it in so that you can see. So in fact, this Mars, Neptune, Neptune, Mercury, this really powerful influence is with us all over Christmas. Christmas Day itself will be either magical and unreal and romantic and very special, or it's going to be chaotic, and there are going to be all sorts of things that are happening that you feel, well, why and how mysterious that particular development is, and why did that have to happen? And I think particularly when we get a very strong Neptune influence, we have to look at things to do with water and rivers and oceans, rain. And so is it that in this period of time that there is a lot of that in certain areas of the world, and that this, in fact, is the reason that it causes more problems? Because whenever you get floods or you've got problems with water systems or, leaks of one sort or another, then, that does colour the Christmas period. And it's just really a sense of giving you this picture so that if you are living in an area or you've got a problem with your plumbing, really try to fix it before we get to Christmas, because for sure around that Christmas period, if anything isn't in tip-top condition, it's going to start to cause you a problem. But I mentioned the word leaks just then. Well, of course, we get other kind of leaks when we look at Mercury square Neptune, Mars square Neptune, the Sun square Neptune. And so these are whistleblowers and leaks of information and in our own lives, sort of gossip and things just slipping out. So remember, this influence is all over the Christmas period. So if you've got a secret, make sure you hang on to it. Otherwise, it could just slip out unintentionally. The other thing that's quite interesting is that the full moon on the 27th of December, which is in Cancer, Sun in Capricorn, Moon in Cancer. On the same day, Mercury is squaring Neptune, but of course, Mercury is retrograde. And on the 4th of December, when we have the full moon in Gemini, then that too was a day when Mercury was squaring Neptune. So there may be a real link between these two periods of time, in that there's either a mystery that began at that time, the mystery deepens, or there is a sense of beginning to be able to resolve a mystery or some other kind of thing that is a little bit unfathomable to you. The other thing that I want to also talk about while we're looking at this particular chart is that that new moons begin cycles and full moons end cycles. And we have one every year, depending on which month it is. There will be a new moon in a particular sign, and that same sign will be a full moon 6 months down the line. And so when we look at this particular set of new moon, full moon, the new moon that takes place on the 12th of December, which will be the new moon in Sagittarius, there is a 6-month period from that point until the 23rd of May in 2024. Those 6 months complete that cycle. So the things that are happening around this new moon, whatever they may be, developments that come into being, perhaps also things that are very relevant at the time of the new moon, they have some kind of denouement, some kind of closure when you get 6 months further down the line. And this is often very present if we happen to begin a relationship, for instance, around the time of the new moon. Then 6 months later, we've reached a point where we either know that relationship has legs and we're going to go forward with it, or it really means we have to accept that for one reason or another, it wasn't right for us. And we also get the same thing when we look at the full moon in Cancer, because that is the end of a cycle that began with the new moon in Cancer on the 17th of July. So this is another point at which you can look back, see what was going on in your life in the July, what in fact may have been going on in the world at that period, and then thinking, does it have a reference point? Is there a reference point to July when you come to the Christmas period and this full moon in Cancer? They are what I call bookends. They have a relationship with each other. And of course, if the new moon is the time of new beginnings, the full moon in Cancer is the time of completion, of closure, of closing chapters. This particular full moon in Cancer, I love the name of this. It's called the long night moon. And of course, for obvious reasons, this is the shortest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. the night is long, and hence the idea of the long night moon. It's also the cold moon, but I think I'd much rather have the long night moon. And as with all things Cancer, we're focused on the home. We're focused on our family, as we would be at Christmas, and we're focused on children particularly. The fourth house is our ancestors, our forebears. And you know, I sometimes talk about this at Halloween, why we put pumpkins in the window and lights in the window at Halloween. It was the time, again, going back to pagan times, where you put a light in the window to draw your ancestors to home so that you could celebrate with them and join with them. And in a way, this is the same sort of kind of thing, the idea of the fourth house with your forebears, especially at this time, remembering who came before us and celebrating their lives and their part in our families is another way of sort of making Christmas, I think, a little bit special. We're looking back in time at this particular Christmas. It's also the foundations of the future. So I think a lot of you will be thinking about, all right, Christmas is here, the end of the year is just around the corner, starting off on a new 2024. What do we want to have in place? What are the foundations of the future for us? Our long-term future and also the future, immediate future of our plans. And in fact, in many ways, both the new moon in Sagittarius, which is about what is our 10-year plan? Where do we want to be in 5 or 10 years' time? We're also sort of looking at the foundations of the future with this full moon in Cancer. We have a look at other things I might want to mention here. Well, yes, Mars is square Neptune. I just pointed that out. We've looked at what that means. Mercury square Neptune, Mars square Neptune. What a lot of Neptunian influences. But also on the 31st of December, Jupiter turns stationary direct. So all through that run up to Christmas, Jupiter has been gaining power. And Jupiter is a planet of great good fortune. Again, rather like what I said about that Venus-Jupiter opposition, it breeds joy, it breeds positivity. And really the same with Jupiter stationary, then all its powers of the things happening for the best. That's another way of looking at events at this time. And also, you know, beaming positivity, positive energy at situations when Jupiter is at its most powerful. Certainly, if you have anything round about 5 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius, and this Jupiter is going to speak volumes to you, it's going to be a time of great developments, or a time when you feel sort of empowered. And when we feel empowered, we can get behind things. And also, I think if you have a late April birthday, 25th of April, then this particular, well, Jupiter is right on your sun. So it's marking a period of growth, of opportunity. And maybe it's a case of, if you've got birthdays around this time, that you really need to look for the opportunity, even if it's in an obstacle. That old cliche, but it's so true. And there's so much around towards the end of this particular year. Coming very briefly into the beginning of 2024, the new year opens on a Venus-Saturn square. And of course, that's been applying for a little while. It's been applying at least 8 days before that. So again, it is with us sort of over the Christmas period. And I think, although with Venus and Saturn, it's good in the sense of relationships, because we can put relationships on a solid footing, which is why things like marriages, you need a Venus-Saturn aspect. It really helps to solidify and give durability to a marriage. You need the Saturnian glue for it. In regard to making statements of the heart, then they get really boosted by that Saturn aspect. But on the other hand, we always have to look at negatives as well. Everything in astrology is a positive and negative. There's no such thing as all good and all bad. But what we look at here is the sense that maybe a relationship is over. It may not be the time to discuss it or to do anything about it, but it's just that realization as you come into the new year. Don't be surprised if your heart sinks and you think, I really expected great things from all of this, and guess what? It's same old, and do I want that anymore? That may be something that you're greeted with on New Year's Day. The idea, well, we passed into this new year, but already it seems as though nothing has changed. Right, but what will have changed on the 2nd of January is that Mercury will turn direct, thank goodness. So it means that for a lot of us, our journeys back home from the holidays or other kinds of journeys, as we're getting ready to go back to work or take the kids to school every day or whatever it may be, we at least now have Mercury with us, so to speak. So now I want to take you through sign by sign this period, showing you what we're looking at, what to expect from this particular time, Aries through to Pisces. What I want to say again, as I often find I have to say, is that people do get confused sometimes in that, are we doing things by sun sign? Well, yes, we are. If you only know what your sun sign is, then you're going to have to listen to your sun sign. But if you know what your rising sign is, and you therefore know where the new moon, which house the new moon is taking place, which houses the full moon is occurring in, then obviously you'll want to look at that particular ascending sign using the sign I give as the ascending sign. But you know what? I quite like using the sun sign itself. I think the sun is the center of our solar system. It's what all the planets revolve around it, including ourselves. It's the heart center of our solar system. And there's a lot to be gained from a kind of solar perspective as well. So well worth listening to both of them just to get just a little bit of extra information. So let's get moving, okay? Let's start with our first sign of the zodiac, and I'm going to start with Sagittarius this time. And the reason I'm starting with Sagittarius is because the new moon is in Sagittarius, and of course, we're in the season of Sagittarius. So this new moon for you is, of course, everything I said. It's a new beginning, a new chapter. But as always, it's important to embrace this idea consciously, because although we could just hang around and wait for the cosmos to deliver and say, oh, guess what? This is new. This is going to start something that I'm kind of excited about. We need to embrace the astrology and think, I am empowered now. I've got this new moon in my sign. What new beginnings do I need to get behind? And so in many ways, this new moon is really about your personal life, your personal ambitions, things to do with, there can be things to do with your appearance, of course. And perhaps over Christmas, we often think, let me do something special for Christmas. I want to look a little bit different. But it's a little bit more meaningful than just window dressing. That new moon is about getting a whole new kind of perspective on yourself, and empowering yourself, I think, is a good way to think of it, because so often we appear to be hanging around for other people, don't we? We're waiting for someone to tell us that this is happening, or that we've got that, or that the result is good, or they're prepared to join us, or they're going to give us the time. So we spend a lot of time hoping that, someone's going to contact us and then we can get moving with something. Well, I think this new moon really is saying to you, sometimes if you keep on waiting, or you keep scattering your interests, you keep trying a bit of this and going in that direction and doing a bit of that, it's not going to get you where you want to go. And I think this new moon is about getting more focus, Sagittarius, really homing in on what it is that you want your life to have in it, who you want to be in a way, because the first house, your sign, as we're looking at, is extremely personal. And you've also, of course, got Mercury and Mars in your sign as well. So there's a lot of kind of activity, whether that's physical activity, you're doing an awful lot of things that require physical effort, or whether it's more that there's a lot of aggravation around because you've got so much to do, not necessarily of a physical nature, but of a mental, organizing, whatever it is kind of nature. And with Mercury so close to Mars as well, there is this sense of getting burnout if you're not careful. Remember, this is all very personal, Sagittarius, because it's in your sign. It is a great time to really, I think, put the past behind you. And that could mean anything from perhaps, thinking that, and I think we all do this from time to time. We can't stop thinking about events or people that have got in our way or things that have hurt us or, just basically been a thorn in our side. And I think it's time to drop it all, Sagittarius, and say, you know what? I'm going to start afresh. I'm going to start anew. This is me. This is who I am, out to the world and to myself. And I'm going to make a powerful statement by doing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to embrace this new moon for all it's got, even if it causes aggravation. Remember that Mars Mercury is there as well. I'm going to get there and do it. And I'm going to focus my energies, not scatter them. Now, when we come to the full moon, the sun, of course, has now moved into your second house. So it's about things to do with your self-worth, things to do with money. And a full moon is also about closure, isn't it? So we've got this idea that there's a financial reckoning. Now, of course, there's a financial reckoning at Christmas, isn't there? I mean, especially if we're cheerful spenders, then we blindly spend things and think, oh, well, you know what, I'll cope with that when we get into January. When the bills start coming in, I'll deal with that then. But in point of fact, a full moon is a very good time to get your accounts in order and to really look at what the state of them is and make preparations or even reparations to sort it. It can be a good time because you can close a deal. And even though Christmas you think of at this time, there's not a lot going on in the world, but there still is work and things going on the 27th of December. And this might signify that there is a closure on a property deal. So those of you anxious to see if something regarding a property will get a result, then you're probably looking at around the time of that full moon. And of course, the following 2 weeks, because that is the cycle of the full moon. It gives us another 2 weeks. It's also a time of completion in the sense of maybe feeling very satisfied with the way things have turned out. And I think if we have a real sense of our own value and the way others treat us and show us that they, or treat us like someone of value, it gives us a very fulfilling feeling. And coming again at Christmas, this is just after Christmas Day, so it's in that post-Christmas week, it is a wonderful time, really, to celebrate that sense of feeling complete within ourselves. So yes, on the one hand, there could be a bit of a financial crisis or a little bit of sense that finances are going to be a problem. But at the same time, that full moon also offers that opportunity, really, to experience that sense of complete self-worth. So I'm going to move on to Capricorn now. And we'll see that if we take the new moon in Sagittarius first, the new moon is taking place in the 12th house. And we've got Mercury and Mars along there with it. And as you can see, the little blue lines that I've drawn there, we're focusing on that Neptune in your third solar house. And in my beginning, in the overview, as I was talking about various things, I did talk about this being both a period of great dreams and a kind of inspirational period around the time of the new moon, but it's also chaotic and confusing. And I think when you've got the sun in the 12th house and you've got Mercury and Mars in the 12th house, it is as though you are slightly cut off from reality. Now, I'm not insulting you here. What I'm saying is that it's a time when we need to recharge our batteries, our physical batteries, our emotional batteries, our intellectual batteries, and our spiritual batteries. So we do need rest and time to ourselves. And if you can give yourself, especially around that new moon time, the 12th of December, that time in particular, making sure you put in a couple of early nights, and perhaps you're doing things that are focused on being healthier and fitter, getting more sleep. What you're doing is refilling your tank so that, you will have a great Christmas, and whatever you're planning to do, or whatever you're not planning to do, you're in a much better shape for it. Of course, the thing about the 12th house, and I call it that, the house of shadows and secrets and shadows, is that we get intimations of things. We think, oh, now what was that about? What was that dream about? Why am I feeling this way? What was that signal I just got? But the thing is, we should never act on anything like that when we have the sun in the 12th house, and on this occasion, you've got Mercury and Mars as well. What you want to do is let it simmer, think on it, sleep on it. And then when the sun comes into your sign, and we're looking here, not so very long after that, we're looking at the 22nd of December, then you can start to put those feelings or bring them into reality, start getting behind them. And it is surprising. Let's also take into account how all those factors, the new moon, Mercury and Mars squaring Neptune, we can so easily be misled, and not just misled by other people, but misled by ourselves. So my advice really in the run-up to Christmas is to look after yourself. Don't do anything silly. Don't take risks. Take plenty of rest. Don't buy into rumors. Don't listen to the voice of your fears, or even in a way your hopes. Let's wait until reality comes to town, and then you can see whether those things are justified. Now, if we go further forward and we come to the full moon on the 27th of December, the sun will have been in your sign for about 5 days. So it's already this sense of, I hate to use this word energy, but it's quite a good one. The idea of being re-energized somehow by the sun coming into your sign. But it certainly means you've got the full weight of the sun behind you, so to speak. And the sun is a source of heat, light, energy, power. So you've come into your own now. So we have this full moon, the sun in your sign, the moon in your opposite sign. It's on what we call the relationship axis. And it brings relationships into the arena. So it could be that it's a time to make the ties that bind, because when we get full moons, we get union. We get the idea of bringing things together. Opposites become one. And that's a nice thing to think of. And celebrating the full moon, that sense of union, is a beautiful thing to do. But what it can also be, that full moon, is separation. So we've got two themes playing here, particularly in regard to relationships. Is it the time not to make the ties that bind, but to break the ties that bind? And when we think about Christmas and the New Year, everybody's sort of trying to make the best of it, and everybody wants to be happy. And what happens is that we see everybody's flaws and failings, and things that are already a bit negative get more negative. So that's why there are so many filings for divorce in the first 2 to 3 weeks of January, because people realize over Christmas, I shouldn't be in this relationship. So there is that aspect of things, but let's look again a little bit closer. You'll probably see that I've drawn a red line here, the sun opposite the moon, and then you'll see a red line from the sun to Jupiter and the moon to Jupiter. And Jupiter is in the mix here with that full moon, and Jupiter does bring out the best of things. There's always a nugget of gold in something when you've got Jupiter there. Yes, of course, Jupiter can inflate difficulties, but it is our good news planet, as is Venus. And I think this full moon connecting to Jupiter does really give a feeling of all's well that ends well. And that might be something that really comes to you at this time or in the following 14 days of the waning cycle of the moon. All's well that ends well. Okay, and now we come to Aquarius. So Aquarius, for you, this new moon is taking place in the area of collaborations. Of course, there's a lot more to this area. It has a lot to do with connection. And by connection, I mean, you know how we talk about a situation sometimes? We say, oh, it felt like coming home. And we talk about that sometimes when we meet a group of people, or we go to a place, or we join a group, or whatever it is. There's a sense of kindred spirits about it. And this is an area where we can find that sense of, oh, it's like coming home. And I love that. So whether or not that is something to be experienced on the new moon itself, which is the 12th of December, or whether it's in the following 2 weeks, because that will be the waxing cycle coming to full moon, it's a beautiful concept. And when we find kindred spirits, it is a beautiful thing, because it validates us. And that's certainly one of the meanings of this new moon. But it's also showing perhaps the beginning of a new enterprise, the beginning of a new friendship, the beginning of a new working relationship. And you can also make a new start in all those things as well, so that if perhaps things have gone a little astray or things have been flagging, making an effort to put to or re-energize a project, an endeavor, a business, a relationship, friendship, whatever it may be, is a very good thing to do around the time of the new moon. But if you look at these blue lines that link the new moon and Mercury and Mars to Neptune, if we go back to what I was talking about in the overview, then this new moon does draw in Neptune's misty tentacles, as I sometimes call Neptune's effect. And it means that there is a bit of mystery around things, and you will need to be very careful if you are going to start something new, especially a business enterprise, or you're going to start doing something with a group of people and you want to get all your ducks in a row, that Neptune does often lead to missing the point or not getting everything that you need to hand. And also there's this idea of misrepresentation with Neptune as well. And I want you to be particularly careful of meeting with new people who may not be representing themselves as they really are. And it's the same really with the other things that come to you around this time of the new moon and beyond. Your question really has to be, show me your credentials. Let's look at what this is in reality, because you can go, you can get led up the garden path when we look at Neptune in this proximity to the new moon and Mercury and Mars. So to be on the safe side, really check everything out, Aquarius. Now, of course, the other thing when I'm looking at this new moon and looking at the position of Neptune, Neptune is in the second house. So this idea of really being careful with money over this run up to Christmas and perhaps even a little bit after Christmas as well, so that you're careful with transactions online or, careful with your credit cards, whatever you're doing, because it only takes a moment for something to go wrong. So that is a warning that I would want to hand out. But yes, I think we can't entirely forget that Neptune is about the season. And if we've got the new moon connecting to Neptune, as we do here, there is a sense of the magic of the season playing into your life at this time. And we should, like children, enjoy magic. Now, if we come to the full moon, which happens a couple of weeks later, we can see by this time the sun has moved into your 12th house. It's opposing the moon in the 6th house. And the 12th house is this rather fuzzy area of the horoscope. It's what I call the house of secrets and shadows. And the reason why I'm talking like this is that at the end of, well, not so much the end, the 20th of January, the sun will come into your sign. So before that time, sun coming into Capricorn on the 22nd of December, this begins a period of recharging your batteries, of getting match fit, whatever you need to be match fit for. So it means getting a little bit more sleep, getting a little bit more rest, paying attention to aches and pains and old injuries and toothaches and all of that, and not sort of leaving it, saying, oh, it'll be all right. We don't need to worry about that. But then, come the full moon, oh, yes, you do need to worry about that. So get things checked out. It's a very good time to have your MOT. And we're not talking about motor cars here. We're talking about your physical, mental, and emotional health. It's a good time to really put that under the microscope and get match fit, as I like to say. This is also a period of time, and it goes right through until the 20th of January, when you need to pay a little bit more attention to your dreams and those intuitions, and we all get them. I mean, you'd think that I would be someone who always paid attention to intuition, but I'm not. I argue with myself. Why do I want to do that? Why am I being reminded of that? No, I don't need to. And then sure enough, I do. So sun in the 12th house, always a time to obey your intuitions. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean steaming forth. It means paying attention to them, looking into them, checking them out, with the idea that once the sun does come into your sign on the 20th of January, you can start activating or acting on those intuitions. Health, as I've said, is a big feature of this particular full moon, and around that time, you'll need not to overdo it. Don't burn the candle at both ends. Don't do too much. But also it has to do with work as well. So it's not just about overdoing the good stuff, overdoing the joy of Christmas. It's overdoing the work of this period of time. And if you are doing too much, you're going to find that there are going to be mistakes and all sorts of other things that happen in regard to overdoing it. If you notice by looking at the red lines that I've drawn from the sun to the moon, and then the sun to Jupiter, the moon to Jupiter, this is because that full moon is angling Jupiter. And that's a beautiful thing. Every planet has its negatives, every planet has its positives. And of course, with Jupiter, you can have too much of a good thing and it will inflate difficulties. Yes, it will. But it is where we get our joy from. So I think this full moon, it to me says that joy comes out of things that happen at this time. And if you're making an ending of any sort, which we need to do at full moon, it's like closing a chapter, then it looks to me as though it can be closed with joy, or that good things come out of the end of that particular chapter. That may be something that you want to keep in mind at this time, Aquarius, okay? So let me move on to Pisces. And Pisces, for you, this new moon is up there in the 10th house of your solar chart, along with Mercury and Mars. So this area of the chart is very much out in the world. This is your place in the world. So it has to do with your career, if you're a very career-oriented person. But it has to do with your status as well. And when we think about our status, we have status as a parent, if we have children. We can have status as a spouse, if we're married. And of course, we can have a status in the sense of the social role that we carry, or the social role we play out there in the world. So the 10th house has a lot to do with what we're aiming for, what we're aspirational about. And it can have to do with our career, can have to do with our material world. So we would look at this new moon and say, hey, guess what? There is a new beginning in relation to all the things I've just mentioned. Does it mean a new job? Yes, it can. Does it mean a new phase in an existing job, a new position within the same company? Yes, it can. Does it mean that you want to start something of your own? Yes, it can. And this is a very good time with the sun in the 10th house to seek backing for your ventures, to get things rolling along with an idea of things that you want to have in place that could make a big difference to your material world, your material existence. It's very much a material house. Now, of course, it can have to do with our parents as well. So for some Pisceans, this may be something new beginning in the life of a parent. And I'm going to leave you just with that idea because it's going to mean different things to different Pisceans. But that idea, of course, is that we look to our parents as role models. And even when we get to be 45 years old or even older, it's still our parents who are our role models. So this could be a very important time for considering what roles our parents play or have played in our life. And if you see the blue lines that I've drawn from the sun, the moon, Mercury, and Mars, all of those planets and luminaries, as we call them, in the 10th house, they're all pointing to Neptune in your sign. So particularly important, everything that I've said is especially relevant to you if you have a mid-March birthday or planets and points around 25 of Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Gemini. But just in general, that Neptune in your sign is about dreams that you have and the idea of, something that you're seeking to have in your life that is a bit intangible. You can't quite see it, feel it, touch it, but it's there and it's powerful. So this new moon is kind of activating that powerful image, that powerful vision, whatever it may be. Will it allow you to develop your vision? I hope so. Or does it mean that this period you're more confused or, less able to put something into a structural form? Although, of course, with Saturn in your sign, and we're talking about that in the year ahead stars and everything else, Saturn following up to Neptune means that you can crystallize those dreams and those visions that you have under Neptune. And this is a very visionary period. It's also a period where you may be let down. We have to think of everything here. There's no such thing as only one tune with anything in astrology, and certainly with Neptune, you get Heinz 57 varieties. So there can be loss, there can be confusion, there can be deception. And I think the fact that the new moon and Mercury and Mars are all angling and Neptune, and we know Mercury is retrograde, it says, buyer beware. Beware what you're getting into. Beware of listening to gossip, the voice of your fears and your hopes. Well, that's an important thing to remember. If we come to the full moon, we see that the sun is in the 11th house, the moon is in the 5th house, and we're on the axis of creativity and collaboration. Is something about to be born? Maybe it's a baby, maybe it's a project, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a love affair, could be all these things. It is as though a gestation period has ended or is about to end, and out of that comes a delivery. Now, remember, I talked about timing here, so we need to go back to the 17th of July, and the new moon in Cancer. Did something begin or develop at that time that is now ready or has reached fruition? Yes, it may. And it is quite a critical time for a love affair because you get to see the reality of the person. Is that someone that you can live with, flaws and all? Or is it really, that is, that a line has been crossed and that's what you can't do. So there's a lot of decision making going on around this Christmas and post-Christmas period for you, and very possibly in regard to a love affair or in regard to a child or a grandchild. This may also be in there. This full moon is angling Jupiter, and you can see that with the red lines that I've drawn between the sun and Jupiter and the moon and Jupiter. And this says to me, something good comes out of this. And very often we can't see the good in a situation at time, especially a stressy full moon event, which may make you feel as though it's all over bar the shouting, or something is overwhelmingly kind of difficult. Whereas in fact, with Jupiter being connected to this full moon, it's saying, aha, wait a minute, something good is going to come out of this. And I sort of like to leave you with that, Pisces, because it's a nice thought, isn't it? That whatever is going on around this Christmas period, something good coming out of all that. So if we come to you, Aries, and we see this is your favorite time of year very often, the sun moving through Sagittarius means it's moving through the 9th house. So not only might you be traveling and connecting with people who are far away, but it kind of beefs up your sense of what does life offer me? What is my big horizon out there? What am I aiming for? And in the overview, I talked about this idea of your hopes and this question you need to ask yourself, where do I want to be in 5 or 10 years' time, which may actually have a real application in the sense of which country do you want to be in? Which town do you want to be in? How do you see where you are in 5, 10 years down the line? Because if where you're at right now isn't taking you where you want to be, then this is the time to correct it. And a new moon is a time to bring in new factors and to do things that set you on a new trajectory. And yes, indeed, Aries, you may be traveling. And this idea of journeys being an adventure is in your stars here. So we can translate that in several ways, can't we? We could say that that journey that you thought was going to be a straightforward one turns out to be an adventure. And what we learn about ourselves, or we learn about all sorts of things on the way to somewhere, is going to be very important. And, you know, I talked a lot about the spirituality of the season, and we get this full blast this year with you because here's this lovely new moon on the 12th of December, angling Neptune, Mercury and Mars angling Neptune as well in the 12th house, that very spiritual, otherworldly area of the horoscope. And it says, you know what? Even if you think you've no time to spend time on your spiritual journey or looking at the spiritual meaning of things, the higher meaning of things, let's just leave it like that. This is going to be incredibly beneficial. And take the time to do that check with yourself. Is this action from higher power, from my higher self? Or is this the little self, you know, reacting to situations and drawing from your spiritual source? Maybe even developing new, you know, not new belief systems necessarily, but new parts of your belief systems. Now, because Neptune is linked to this new moon and to Mercury and Mars, which you can see from the blue lines that I've drawn, it will be possible to get quite misled around the time of that new moon. So if you're going places, make sure you've got your sat-nav set up, you've got a map, you've got a phone, you've got numbers, and that you leave enough time for journeys. But of course, when we talk about journeys, we can mean a journey in terms of getting to the end of something. And so this could be about dialogues and debates and all sorts of other things. And with Neptune in the way, it may mean that you get off point. You know, you're not there, you miss the point, you've let yourself wander. And that could be a danger because it may mean you sign an agreement or you sign up to something and actually you haven't really understood it. So you're going to have to make a special effort, Aries, to really get everything on paper. Make sure you've understood everything around this pre-Christmas, Christmas, post-Christmas period. Make sure everything is recorded. You've got it. You're not going to, you know, missing one duck in that line of ducks you're trying to get in a row. If we look now at the full moon, which happens a fortnight later, 27th of December, we now have the sun at the top of the chart and we have the moon at the bottom. So it is on the axis of life direction. So there's a lot going on I think, around this Christmas period to do with, well, I've already said it once. Well, I've said, where do I want to be in life? And we looked at that in the sense of what place or what you are doing. But this is also about your aspirations in the sense of what do I want to achieve? So the things that I'm working on right now, the jobs that I've got going, the material things that I have in mind, are those aspirations realizable? So this full moon has a lot to do with the completion of something. So it may be that you made a plan. Maybe it's connected with work, maybe it's connected with a home and family, and it's completed. It's done. Is there something else in your life that relates to these two areas of life, your career, where you're going in life, the family, the home? Is it done? Is it over? Does it mean that you've been trying to get something off the ground and actually, no, you can't, this is not going to work, and you discover that on the full moon or around the full moon or in the waning cycle? Or is it that something that's been going on maybe for 6 months since July, or maybe longer, since March, which is 9 months, or since January, December, January? Is it over? Is it done? Is something completed? Only you can answer that question. But what I would say to you with this idea of endings, that is always what we get with a full moon. The sun is trining Jupiter, the moon is sextiling Jupiter. And I've drawn those red lines so that you can see that. Jupiter in the second house of your value and self-worth. It seems to me that whatever happens around this time of the full moon is giving you the opportunity to feel full of self-worth, to regain your self-worth, or to at least put your self-worth into the picture, which may help you handle a difficulty, coming back to yourself and saying, does this situation reflect my true worth? Yes, it may. Yes, it may not. But the whole idea of that Jupiter linking up to that full moon and coming that Jupiter as it does in the second house, it has a reference to your self-value, what value others place in you, and it will be at the core of things around this time. And actually, it may also mean that there's money coming in as well, which would be very nice. Does it mean you're spending a lot? Yes, it might. But it would be nice to think that you're generating income as well, or that there is good news financially. But, Aries, I'm part of the Aries team myself. We can be very cheerful spenders. So might I suggest we don't spend so cheerfully this Christmas, and we keep our eye on our accounts. So now I'm going to come to Taurus, and we can see that this new moon in the sign of Sagittarius is taking place in the 8th house. And the 8th house of the horoscope is such a misunderstood area. I mean, I remember learning about this as a beginner of astrology and thinking, well, how does this work in my life? Death and rebirth. What's that got to do with anything? But the 8th house, really, when we start to look at it in terms of what we get from relationships, what we get from our financial relationships in particular, it starts to make a lot more sense with this idea of death and rebirth, in the idea of legacies and inheritances in the 8th house. This is what we get in our financial, we can sometimes inherit money, but we can also get money from settlements. This means financial relations we've had with people, whether they're ex-partners or they're companies we've worked for or other kind of organizations. There can be a settlement. And that's, potentially there with the sun moving through this area, Taurus. And the new moon means there's a new development here. So something new coming along in the idea of receiving money. This is also about your relationship with banks and lending institutions and credit card companies. So it can literally mean a new credit card, I suppose. But it's a little bit more than that. This idea of the new moon is that you're going to create new financial relationships, which is a good thing. And people are going to come to you with offers, and they will be associated with new, financial orders. There's also intimacy in this area, because what we get from other people in a relationship isn't just money, it's love, it's sex, it's all those things as well. So we get the idea of a renewal here. And is it the renewal of a moribund sex life? Well, it might be, or it might be a new intimate relationship, or it could be some new development linked to an intimate relationship. And I like that idea, new moons, new chapters, new beginnings. And intimacy is such an important part of our lives, because when we share that very part of ourselves, which we keep hidden, it involves trust, it involves all sorts of things, but it can be so very rewarding. And that new moon holds the promise of all of that. Now, it is squaring Neptune, as you can see. These are the blue lines that I've drawn from the Sun and Mars and Mercury to Neptune. So it means there is some confusion here. And if we take all those ideas I've just given you about financial relationships, there could be some confusion about that. Is it that this is the right sum of money in the case of, a financial relationship? Is it that something's been forgotten? Is it that somebody dropped the ball? Is it that something is very misunderstood about this whole arrangement with money? You've got to bear that in mind with Neptune. And we've also got to think of the time of year it is, 12th of December, run up to Christmas. We're often very preoccupied with all sorts of things, whether it's trying to complete things at work, whether they've got their kids with their nativity plays and everything. So we're running around trying to be there for everyone, do everything. And that means that there's a degree of slippage going on in the sense of, following the money. So be careful of financial transactions during this whole period that we're talking about now, because it will be possible to make a big mistake. So keep your eye on the ball when it comes to finances. So if we come to the full moon Taurus, we've got this cutting across the axis of communication. And obviously at Christmas, we're often talking to a lot of people because there's office parties, there's family get-togethers, there's people we're talking to in different parts of the world on our virtual screens. And it means, on the one hand, that full moon is about the sense of completion that we get when we connect with people that way, people we love, people we care about, people who are of great interest to us. So that full moon is about the importance of communication with people in our neighborhood, in our life neighborhood, so to speak, and also in our bigger neighborhood, our world neighborhood, those who live far away from us. It may also involve a journey. And there are journeys we can take in miles on a bus, boat, plane, or train. And I think that sometimes on a full moon in particular, then we have problems with travel because people aren't perhaps as chilled as they might be, and things tend to go wrong at full moon, for one reason or another. So travel can be a little bit slow. So if you're trying to make return journeys from Christmas on the 27th, remember that full moon could get in the way of smooth travel. But there's also the idea that the full moon could get in the way of good communication. So people miss the point, and there are misunderstandings, and emotions are getting in the way of common sense or logic, so to speak. This full moon might also say it's the end of a journey. And that's just a sentence to think about, Taurus, the idea of the end of a journey. What does that exactly mean? It's going to be different from Taurian to Taurian. I mean, it could be literal, you're coming home, but I want it to be a little bit more broad than that. So you're completing something. And once the journey is at an end, you can start to see its purpose and work on what it's left you in terms of experience and memory. Jupiter is, of course, in that full moon picture, as you can see with the red lines I've drawn towards Jupiter in your sign. And I've said to one of the other signs, when I look at this and I see a full moon, which is about endings, it says to me, all's well that ends well. And I think that might be a good thing to stick on your fridge as a fridge sticker, or above your desk, or wherever you see it often during a day, because it will remind you that even if during this period that I'm covering, your Christmas stars, it seems as though things have gone more right than they've gone, more wrong than they've gone right, remember, all's well that ends well. And so Gemini, let's come to you. And this new moon is taking place in the 7th house of relationships. So it is all about relationships. And a new moon is a new start. So an old relationship, a relationship that's been in the doldrums, can get a kick start. There may be something happening in your lives that gives you that kick start, or it could be that something happens just between you that kind of forges that reconnection that makes you think, I want to be in this relationship. It can, of course, signal a new stage of a relationship, something like marriage, perhaps, or engagement. So there are those things to consider as well. And it can also be a whole new relationship. So if you're single and seeking, then this is the time to set aside all those old stories about there's no one out there for me. When you get a new moon in your 7th house, it's time to say, well, maybe there is someone out there for me. And that's a very fertile time to meet people. It's not just a fertile time to meet people who you can partner up with. It's a fertile time to get together with people who will turn out to be good people to know in your life. That new moon, as you can see, I've drawn blue lines to Neptune, which is in there in the 10th house. And there is a proviso or a caveat with this new moon in Sagittarius. And that is that they must be careful of that what you're seeing is true. With Neptune, it's a little bit misty. So especially if you're meeting someone new at this time and you're feeling, oh, this might turn into something. Well, it might be the real thing. But I would recommend doing some kind of research on that person, not necessarily making it obvious or doing something that you're going to feel really bad about, so much as perhaps finding out really, from people who may know them, more about them before you do get involved. Because although Neptune can inspire true love matches, it can bring you in connection with your soulmate, it can also be a very deceptive influence, and you can think you've got a great prince or a princess when in fact you've got a frog. And the sooner you start to see red flags or you question someone's authenticity, that's something you need to do with this particular new moon. If you meet someone at the new moon and it is angling Neptune, then you need to be cautious about that person. And what I would say that in about 6 months' time, when we're looking at the 23rd of May, for instance, when there'll be a full moon in Sagittarius, the sun will be in your sign, the moon will be in Sagittarius, then we'll get some kind of completion on what happens at this time, this period of December. So a relationship may turn out to be the right relationship for you in 6 months' time. There's also a 3-month period that might be important too, 3 to 6 months. Or it could be that the relationship will have run the distance by the time you get to that full moon in Sagittarius at the end of May. Let's now come to the full moon in Cancer. So that means the sun is in the 8th house for you, the moon is in the 2nd house. And this is an axis to do with with worth, with self-worth, with how much you're worth, with the value other people place in you, your financial relationships, what money's come to you, your attitude to money, and of course, your attitude to your being deserving of money, which is very important. You know, a lot of people lose money that they're given, large sums of money, whether they win it on the lottery or they get given an inheritance, and in no time at all, they've lost that money. And often it's because they feel they don't deserve it. It's not the same as earning your money. Blood, sweat, and tears has brought that money to you, and somehow you keep it. But when it's given to you, you lose it. It dwindles away. You're not deserving of it. And that really is something to bear in mind, Gemini. If that's appropriate to you at the moment, you're coming into an inheritance, or there is a settlement due to you, or you're dealing with something that means a large sum, but it isn't necessarily your earned income. Because have a think about that. Do you deserve it? And what you need to do is feel fully involved with it. That way, you won't dissipate it, or it won't just disappear. But of course, a full moon is about accounting. It's a reckoning. So it's a very, very good time to look at your financial position. How good is it? How bad is it? And to make adjustments accordingly. There can be deals done at this time which turn out to be good deals. Things get settled. So whether you're trying to sell or buy a house, or whether you're trying to get an agreement from a bank, or you're trying to do something that would amount to doing a deal can be struck on this full moon. And remember, there's a 2-week cycle in which the promise of the full moon is fulfilled, because it goes right through to the next new moon. So you have that period from the 27th of December through to the next 14 days. Now, in as much as we looked at the new moon, and also, of course, Mercury and Mars angling Neptune, this full moon angles Jupiter. And when we look at Jupiter, we think of good things, we think of expansion, we think of growth. Of course, in a negative way, we think of inflation, we think of things getting out of hand and out of control, and not being able to deal with something that's got too big to be handled. But I do like to think of the sympathy in this configuration, the sun trining Jupiter, the moon sextiling Jupiter on the full moon. It's almost as though, listen, something good's coming out of all this. There are benefits. There is growth here in a good way. And I want you to think about that, especially around the time of the full moon. If it does seem to be a particularly stormy or difficult time, things appear to have gone more wrong than they've gone right. Remember, we're looking here at that beautiful Jupiter connection to the full moon. And it says, you know what? This is going to be more right than wrong. So now I'm going to come to Cancer. And when we look at the new moon for you, we're looking at the new moon in the 6th house of work and well-being. And I've looked at this house as, you know, if you've listened to me often enough on my videos, I always talk about the 6th house being very misunderstood. You know, if you're looking for career, you need to look at the 10th house. What do I want to be? What do I want to do that supports my material world? Whereas in the 6th house, it's more how you work. What is your attitude to work? How do you come to work? You know, how do you feel about work? Are you living to work or working to live? That's what we find in the 6th house. It's that part of life. But it's also about systems, so that how our life works, how it runs, is due to the good systems we have in place. So this particular new moon in this particular area is saying, you know what, it's time to get a new set of systems going. It's time to look at your own system. That means your health system. Do you need to check up? Do you need to attend to things that don't feel too good? And that's your dental health, your mental health, every bit as much as it is your physical health. So this new moon is about getting a new health start, getting your health and fitness in good order. And there could be new treatments and new opportunities, new programs, new devices that help you lead a fitter, better kind of life. When we come to work, we can be looking at new people coming into the workplace. We can look at new projects in an existing work situation. But we could be looking at a new source of work as well. All things are promised by this new moon. This area too is about our purpose in the sense of our service and responsibilities to others. So this may give you a new source of that. So there's a new responsibility coming, which you should accept cheerfully, because what we accept as a sixth house duty is something that enhances our spiritual progress. So no matter how you may feel it initially, I don't want that responsibility. I don't want that duty. By accepting it, goes towards your spiritual duty and your spiritual growth. That might be a very important thing to think about. Now, this new moon and Mercury and Mars are also angling Neptune. And I've drawn some blue lines here so that you can see that quite clearly. And when we put Neptune in this mix, as I explained in the overview, things can get very foggy. You don't see things for what they truly are. You either have too much hope and optimism about things. They're too good to be true. They cannot be fulfilled. On the other hand, you can be negative and think, oh, this will never come off. This is a bad thing. This will never work. I'm not good enough. All those Neptunian negatives we give ourselves. So you have to be careful here, Cancer, that you really are looking at something in its reality, especially in regarding work and health and purpose and all those things that I've just talked about. Make sure that you've looked at the small print and agreements. If you're going on journeys, make sure that you've looked at all the qualifying things attached to that journey, and most of all, have a backup plan, especially if you're going around Christmas, because remember, Mercury is retrograde, so it is going to be difficult to get from A to B generally in this period without making a good plan and having a backup plan as well. If we come to the full moon, Cancer, well, of course, this is hugely important for you because the moon is in Cancer. The sun is in Capricorn. And when the moon is in, it's a full moon, but the moon is in your sign, I always say that you're empowered because it's as though you get the full lunar rays, in your soul, if you like. And so the ideas that come to you, the feelings that you have, they're real feelings. They are empowering feelings. And at the same time, when we think about the sun moving through the seventh house, and here we have relationships. So everything I'm saying about empowerment has a lot to do with a relationship. So it's getting into your power in a relationship. And in a funny kind of way, it's about allowing your feelings to be your power tool, not facts and figures and all of that, but your emotions are your power tool, your tool of empowerment. And sometimes we forget how important that is when we're poles apart from someone. By showing our feelings or operating from our feelings, it can turn a situation around. So full moon on this axis, this relationship axis, can point to union. So it is a good time to get engaged, to get married, to decide to go into a relationship at a more permanent level. And because it's a full moon, it will take us back to the new moon, which began on the 17th of July. That was in your sign. So maybe something was decided, or a person that you met, or something related to a relationship has its completion date around the 27th of December and a little bit beyond. And it'd be certainly worth thinking about how that late July and late December period are linked in some way. They could be very, very illuminating, the events that happened then as to where they are now. So it is both a time to make the ties that bind, but it is also a time to break the ties that bind. Remember, with a polarity, you've got attraction and repulsion. You've got unity and you've got disunity, union and separation. So for some Cancerians, this is a time to say, you know what, I think we're done. This is the end of the road. But guess what? When we look at these red lines I've drawn from the sun to Jupiter, the moon to Jupiter, it's saying, you know what? The decision you make is going to be good. So that even if right at the moment that that happens, you feel sunk into a sinkhole of despair, point of fact, something good is happening from this point. But of course, you may be very aware, if you're making a commitment to someone, that this is something that's going to enhance your life and be something that you're going to benefit from. Incidentally, I have talked, I suppose, in large part about emotional relationships, romantic relationships, marital relationships, you know, bearing everything I've said here. But it can also be a business relationship. And so if you're coming together with a company or you're coming together with another person for the purposes of business, that full moon is a good time to settle on it and to ensure that something good comes out of it. So now I'm going to come to Leo. And Leo, here we have that new moon in your fellow fire sign of Sagittarius in one of the happy houses of the horoscope, the 5th house of joy. This is the area that has everything to do with offerings from the heart, offerings from within. It's creative and procreative. So the idea of a new moon here, new beginning, new life, could actually apply quite literally. And what you could be doing is bringing a new life into the world. Or maybe you're going to be a grandparent or a godparent even. This idea of a small little bundle of joy now enhancing your life, bringing joy into your life. That's a nice thing about this new moon. But it's much more than that. You know, it isn't only about babies and pregnancy and all of that. It's about projects close to your heart. And we can all have lots of those, you know, when you think about the things that you put your heart and soul into. It could be a business project. It can be a social enterprise. It could be anything. And it can be a love affair. Doesn't a love affair have heart and soul? Yes, it does. So this new moon is about all those things. It's a tier of meaning. And for some, it's going to be this, but for the others, it's going to be that. But you are not going to be short of an answer as to what it all means if you focus on the words that I just said, things that involve your heart and soul. I think that just sums it up. New beginnings. That's a good way to look at it. Also, you'll see the blue lines that I've drawn from the sun and also the moon to Neptune, Mars and Mercury. That means, or what I said earlier in the overview, that the new moon is squaring Neptune in the 8th house here. So there is a warning light with Neptune always. It means seeing is believing. And there is a sense that if there is a lot of magic and romance going on around the time of the new moon, it's not very real. And that doesn't matter. We need our moments of unreality. We need romance. We need to be taken out of ourselves. I'm totally behind that. But what we don't want to do is get caught up in a scam or find ourselves buying into something that really is not what it seems to be. So be particularly careful of the things you invest in, the things that you do that have your heart and soul behind them around this time of the new moon. And of course, if you followed me through the overview, you'll know that the sun, Mercury, Mars, there's this long kind of season of aspects to Neptune, which really basically covers this video, the Christmas stars. And so we need to bear it in mind at all times. Seeing is, believing. And that's an important thing to remember. Although, as I said before, Neptune can inspire great love matches, great cell-to-cell connections. It can be a marvelous experience, when you hear great music, or you just have a fabulous time, a thrilling time. We need that. That's fine. It's just that I feel it's my duty as your astrologer to point out the downside. So if we go on, Leo, and we look now at the full moon, we see that the sun in Capricorn is in the 6th house and the moon is in the 12th house. And this is an axis that has a lot to do with our health and well-being, but not just the health of our bodies, it's the health of our soul, our spirit, and also our mental health as well, our dental health as well. So whenever we get a full moon, we know that we're going to be seeing something or experiencing something that is bringing something to the bubble. We are aware of it. So if you're listening to me now and you're thinking, well, I've had a toothache for the last 2 days, don't just hope it's going to go away or put some cloves on it. Go to the dentist. If you're worried about anything, go see to it. Get it fixed before we come into the new moon squaring Neptune and the full moon on that 6th, 12th axis. You don't want to find that when you should be enjoying yourself or doing what you want to do, you've got to go and get better or helped to get better. This also, I think, also buys into the spirit of the season, because this is a very spiritual season, and I do suspect it's going to be more so this year because of everything that's going on in the world. There is both that sense of wanting to give thanks for the things that have come right, the things that have warmed our hearts, but also it's identifying with suffering. We've got so much Neptune around that even if we personally aren't suffering, we can identify with the suffering of others. And I think that's in that full moon as well, and in that new moon. It's all in there somehow. What I would also say about this is that if you've got work problems, because the 6th house is about work, but it's the workplace as opposed to career, which is your 10th house, so that if there are dissatisfactions or problems or issues on the workplace, they're likely to reach their peak around that full moon. And even though that's coming technically in a holiday period, you'd be surprised how things that are bothering you, especially on the work front, start to come up at a time when the routine isn't there, is something else. So maybe it is time to end your work in a certain place, or to end the type of work you do or the way you work. That's certainly something I would be looking at in that full moon. But guess what? That full moon, the sun is trining Jupiter, the moon is sextiling Jupiter, right up there, top of your chart, 10th house, career and life direction. I think whatever ends at this time is making way for something new and better. And that something new and better comes out of any crisis you experience at this time. And so to Virgo. So Virgo, for you, this new moon is at the base of your horoscope. It's taking place in the 4th house, the 4th house of home and family, the roots of life, the foundations of the future. So a new moon really is almost a new beginning all round. And you may already understand what this means, because you've got a new member of the family coming in, whether that's by birth or marriage, or maybe it's a new home, or it's a new home in the sense of you painted, decorated, got a conservatory, so you've got a new look on the home front. But psychologically, it is about a new beginning, at that most personal level of your life. I mean, we have this way of saying, oh, I'm coming home. And where home is means so many things. That sometimes it's about a relationship, isn't it? We feel that that person represents our home. You know, you've come home. That group, that thing, whatever it is, can be a coming home experience. It's something that addresses that real need to be part of a home, part of a family, to have our security and stability. So this new moon is a time of affirmation or reaffirmation about the home within ourselves and how we need it to have 4 strong walls and to be durable in terms of what weathers happens to it. And that can apply to the sense of family and the real family that you have, the reconnection, the rebonding, the reaffirmation of your family ties, to the sense really that home is always within us and that that too needs affirming or reaffirming at this time. Now, because we have Neptune coming in here, so we've got Mercury and Mars squaring Neptune, the new moon squaring Neptune, and Neptune is in the 7th house. And you know, Virgo, I've talked about this so often in your forecasts and on my audios and everything. But somebody plays into all of this. Is it that you've met somebody who is an inspiration and really contributes to this sense of coming home or feeling that sense of being rooted? Or is it the reverse and someone is upsetting that feeling and getting in the way of home? Is it a partnership, a relationship, or just a person in your life? And what I would say about that is just be sure of the facts of everything. And sometimes, you know, that thing about being ghosted when somebody doesn't, you know, not connecting with you. And we also think somebody is playing with our emotions or playing with our mind. That's a dangerous person. I think you need to recognize that if that relates to you, if you're feeling that, if you're connecting with what I'm saying, then you need to really establish what's going on, because that might be the thing getting in the way of all those good feelings about being at home in your life, being at home in yourself. It may also mean on a practical level that somebody pulls out of a domestic agreement or some kind of property agreement. I'm only just throwing it in there. I'm not saying it's absolutely the case, but it's something we need to bear in mind. When we come to the full moon, we're on this creative, collaborative axis, which is lovely, really, because it means the gestation period is over. So something that you've been working on, something that's been building for a while, it could be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, could even be a year, is ready for completion. It's ready to be revealed, ready to be delivered. And it's a nice thing. It's a gestation period and it's at an end. And that full moon is signifying that. And since that full moon is hooked up to Jupiter, these are where the red lines are taking you, it means there's a joyous delivery from a period of gestation. And you can play around with those words however you want to sort of fit your particular circumstances. This area of the chart can be about pregnancy, it can be about childbirth, it can be the birth of enterprises, it can be collaborative ventures, it can be all these sorts of things. So in a way, the full moon is saying it's complete, it's done, it's at an end. But of course, there can be another stage from that later, but a stage of it will be at an end, or it may be at the end completely. But as I pointed out, with Jupiter in the mix, lovely, lovely Jupiter, that is such a good factor. You know, it's going to be a sort of happy ever after picture. So Libra, this new moon for you is taking place in the 3rd house of communication. It's a you know, what do we mean by communication? Well, this is a lot to do with learning, knowledge, information gathering. It's got to do with travel. It's got to do with our environment that is around us, our small world, if you like. So this means that something new is about to begin. A new chapter is opening. Does it mean you're in a new neighborhood? You've moved to a new neighborhood. Does it mean you're about to start a new study course? Does it mean that something in your life is a new platform for you to communicate on? And we're all communicating these days, aren't we, on social media, one form or another. So it says it's a new chapter. There's a new chapter coming in your ability to communicate, to learn, to share information, to sort of get to know your world. Now, this new moon and Mercury and Mars are squaring Neptune. So around this time, and actually for most of this period, you really do have to be very discerning with your information, whether it's information you're giving other people. Make sure that it's true, it's real, you've got the facts, you know what you're doing, you haven't misunderstood something or you're misrepresenting something, and vice versa. What people are telling you, the information that's coming to you, you need to be absolutely sure it's correct. Now, I'm a great list person. I don't know whether you are as well, but it will be a very good idea to keep a running list all this month of things that need to be checked off and done. And if you try to get hold of someone and they're not there, make a note of it, keep trying, because a missed connection at this time, and listen to my words carefully, a missed connection could prove to be very troubling, be very difficult to get things back on an even keel or to put a wrong to right if you miss something. So that's a really, really important bit of information. Now, of course, you may be traveling at this time. We've got a retrograde Mercury, it's in the 3rd house, and it's squaring Neptune. So if you're traveling on a big journey or a small journey, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a long day's journey into night and that it's going to be overcomplicated. But if things can go wrong, they will go wrong with a Mercury retrograde squaring Neptune. So make sure you know the way you're going. Make sure you've got the information that you need to hand. Make sure you've got all sorts of telephone numbers or whatever you may need to make sure that if you are held up or if something fails to come through, the trains are on strike, the buses aren't going anywhere, the planes have stopped flying, you will be able to inform people. Now, of course, Neptune is in the 6th house for you at the moment. It's been a long-term resident there. It's going to go out in another year or so. But Neptune, of course, is making sometimes work conditions very strange. Very weird things happen on the work front. Whether you get let down, people promise you work and then it doesn't materialize. Or you're working with people who prove to be very, you know, they're not very helpful. They do things that let you down. Or you may feel that the work that you're doing is to no purpose, that somehow you're not reaching where you need to reach or doing what you intend to do. It will pass, but I think it's important really to have more structure in your thinking and more structure in your life generally. And when I think about the sign of Libra, whether you've got Libra rising or you are a Libran, you are a great procrastinator. You put things off. But sometimes that's a danger in itself, is that you don't get to complete something. And maybe there's something about this new moon and its squares to Neptune that is revealing that to you with an opportunity to set that kind of attitude or things that are going to rights. But if something mysterious happens on the work front, you know, don't buy into it. Really wait until you get some hard facts that you can follow through on. Now, if we come to the full moon, it's a little more, well, it packs a more powerful punch because we've got the sun at the base of the chart, you've got the moon at the top of the chart, you've got the life direction axis in play. So we're looking at things to do with the family on the one hand, and again, back we come to career and work on the other. So there's an ending here. And it's going to end in different ways for different Librans. For some, this full moon may say, you know, you lived long enough at this house, this flat, this room, this wherever you are, and you're moving on. You're moving. You're saying goodbye to where you live. But it could be that you're saying goodbye to someone who you've lived with. Perhaps it's an offspring who's going off to have his or her own home. It could be that kind of thing. So it's a family member as opposed to a thing to do with your home per se. It can also be to do with work. For some Librans, it may mean it's retirement. You've come to the end of all those years of work and your place in the world. It's now all going to be very different. It doesn't have to happen on the day, but it's within the symbolism of this full moon. It may also be to do with an issue. So if you've had some kind of family issue, or there's been some career issue and it's dragged on for a long time, it's ending. It's over. It's done with. It's time to move on. Other things will take their place. And when I think again that this is Christmas, and we often gather with family for Christmas and friends, and we reach out to people who we haven't spoken to for a long time, it may be that there have been misunderstandings or a sense that you haven't really been as close as you wanted to be. And I think this full moon ending is sort of saying, you know, let's bring an end to that, and, you know, let's put it behind us and let's move on to a new kind of relationship. And the other reason why I think this is quite positive is that the sun is trining Jupiter. That's that red line going towards Jupiter. And this Jupiter is sextiling the moon. So it seems as though the understandings you reach around the Christmas period, around the time of that new moon, are going to lead to a happier state of affairs. And it may even have a financial aspect to it, that whatever you settle and deal with and do, whatever is done and dusted around this time, leads to riches of one sort or another. I think that's a very nice way to sort of end, don't you? So yes, I'm coming up to my final sign, which is Scorpio. And Scorpio, for you, this new moon is taking place in the second house of self-worth. So it has everything to do with money. It has everything to do with you as a person. Who are you? The value you bring to other people, the way other people show that you are of great value to them. That's so important in our lives. If we feel full of value, our lives are rich. But so often people don't value us. Sometimes we're short of money, and it does affect us. There's no two ways about it. Of course, money isn't the most important thing in life. But when we don't have money and we can't pay our bills and all those sort of things are going on, it's not a lot of fun, and it affects us. Deep down, it affects our self-worth. So for one reason or another, I think we need to look at this new moon, and also, of course, its connection to Neptune, and say, look, I am not my money. I am not my assets. I am who I am. So it's affirming your self-worth in terms of what you offer the world, in terms of yourself. It may also be, of course, what you do for a living, so that you do something that other people appreciate or they pay you for or whatever. So it is about income. It is about work. But when we feel good about who we are and we know what we do is good and it's given from the heart and soul and full of our experience, somehow that knowledge enriches us and something magical happens in return, and people start to pay you more, or they start to treat you better. Whichever way you want to get around this, it is all to do ultimately with yourself. And you know, we talk sometimes about imposter syndrome, don't we? And we think we don't deserve something. We think we're not good enough for something. And that really plays into our lives, because we end up not having enough money or not being given the kudos that we need for what we do. But it's when we recognize, you know what, I am full of value, and this I do well, and this I know other people value too. then we start to get a better grip on the material aspect of what we're worth in terms of our assets. So it's getting in place you yourself, first of all, and knowing fully your value. Then you're going to start to see your income increasing and your ability to weather financial storms a lot better. This particular new moon is squaring Neptune, and it makes me say, have you looked at your accounts recently? Because the chances are something isn't right. You've either paid too much for something, some payment's gone out and it shouldn't have done, you haven't been paid what you need, somebody has taken something they shouldn't have taken. There is an element of deception, whether it's self-deception, you haven't bothered to notice, or whether somebody has actively deceived you, that you need to check up on regarding finances and your assets. And of course, our assets are many things, and you need to look into all of that to make sure that you've not been cheated, that there isn't something going on that is nefarious, because Neptune is a little bit like that. And if you're out there spending money before Christmas or doing all those things that we do, enjoying the Christmas season, be careful where you're keeping your valuables and, you know, what you're actually putting money towards, and online as well, because all sorts of things can get under the radar here, and you'll realize later and then have something of a problem trying to deal with it. The full moon is in a different place altogether. It's on the axis of travel and communication, and the moon is in the area of far horizons. So we are really looking at a period of time where if you're not traveling and far and wide, then you are reaching out to people and places that are far away. And of course, we often do that around Christmas, but this year it's a little bit more special because something could be resolved. Now, is it that you had a bit of an upset with someone who you don't see a lot, who's living in a distant place? Because communication is all around the time of this full moon, and just a simple reaching out and resolving it is going to make Christmas in some cases. It is about taking the initiative. The sun is in the 3rd house, so you're the one reaching out. The moon is in the far distance zone of your horoscope, so you're reaching out to somebody who is far away. And I suppose we could stretch this and say, sometimes we talk about people and we say, oh, she's far away or he's far away, but we don't necessarily mean they're 100 miles away. We just mean they're unreachable. We can't reach them. So reach out to someone who is unreachable, because that is going to make your Christmas period. And it may happen in reverse. And if someone reaches out to you, don't be too proud to sort of see it through. Because when we find consensus, when we find union as opposed to separation, then we're going to be happy. And this particular full moon angles Jupiter in the 7th house. So it suggests that there is something linked to another person. Another person is going to be an intermediary. It involves another person. The sense of an ending is to do with another person. It may be a contract. It could be all sorts of things that are now decided with another person or through the agency of another person. And it's very good. We also need to look at travel at this time. And I think, as I said in my overview, with Mercury retrograde all over the Christmas period, it is going to be more complicated getting from A to B. And that may be because there are strikes. It may be because of the weather. It may be because of the internet breaking down and software systems not doing what they should do. But, you know, the important thing is to get there in the end. And certainly if you are traveling and you've got to be somewhere on time, don't leave it till the last minute. What with Neptune heavily in play, new moons, full moons, Mercury and Mars, and everything else we've got in here, don't take a chance, especially when you're going from A to B in miles or in terms of information. Okay, Scorpio, well, that's it. I've done a complete revolution of the zodiac. So oh, you could probably hear my voice. It's kind of, it's kind of going. Do you know, I think I have to shorten these things. What do you think? Maybe let me know if you think I go on too long about things. But yes, here we are at my conclusion. And as always, I've been thinking long and hard about this. And although obviously I'm recording this some period in November or whenever it is, I'm in Christmas mode. And this should be a happy time of year. And I mean, when we go out into our towns and cities and we do see all the Christmas lights and we see the Christmas trees and we see people enjoying themselves and celebrating and the shops are bustling, it's a lovely time of year. But it isn't a lovely time of year if you got something that is really a problem, if you're suffering in any way, whether your heart is broken, whether you've got other worries and you're not feeling good, then this can be the worst time of all, because you think and you look out and you think everyone else is having a great time, but I'm not. And it makes you feel worse because things aren't as you would want them to be. Well, the first thing I want to say about that is that you may be looking at all these people who seem to be enjoying themselves, and you may think, oh, if only I was that person or in that place or whatever it is. But you know, humanity is going through the fire right now, all of us. We may not all be in Ukraine, we may not all be in Israel and Gaza, in all these places in the world where there is turmoil and tragedy. We may not be there, but somewhere in our lives, we are bearing something that is very heavy for us. So everybody is. And I often say this, that the idea is that we are going through this as humanity as a whole, but we have to do it individually. I mean, it helps in a way to know that all of us are making this journey in our own way, going through our own suffering, going through our own problems, whatever it may be. But we are moving humanity forward, and humanity will evolve, and it will, you know, move to where it needs to move. So we're part of this much bigger picture. But that's one side of things I want to say. But I think the more important point I want to get across with this idea of Christmas should be this great, happy, wonderful time, and it isn't. All things pass. Now, I can say this with confidence because I've lived long enough on this earth to know that times that I've gone through, and sometimes they've been a very, very long time, they come to an end and you move on. All things pass, all things change. And another thing to remember about Christmas is that Christmas Day itself is just one day in 365 days of a year. It's just one day. There are 360 plus other days where things can be a celebration, where things can go right. And honestly, sometimes at that darkest moment, when we feel at our lowest, that is just shortly before it all changes. So all that's left to me is to wish you all a very happy Christmas, a very happy new year. And of course, I'll be talking about the new year and what lies ahead, both in my year aheads, which you can get by going to astrolutely.com, but also in all sorts of other ways, as well as the YouTube channel. And the last thing I want to do before I leave you is to say thank you, because without you, this would be nothing. And your comments and all sorts of things that you do enrich my life and make all of this worthwhile. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Bye for now.